inside of that first car is just melted and charred.
Pure panic on board a Metro North train that burst into flames after slamming into an SUV, killing 6 people and injuring more than a dozen others.
I just heard a very loud bang and a lot of screaming.
Tonight, investigators begin combing through the charred rubble for answers to Metro North's deadliest crash.
At this point, everything is on the table. Nothing is off the table.
Good evening. The 5 train passengers killed in the fiery crash are only being identified as men. Their names won't be released until dental records are back.
Tonight, still major questions surrounding the crash. How fast was the train going? Were the brakes applied? And did the conductor sound the horn?
We're waiting on a press conference from the National Transportation Safety Board with an update on the investigation, and we'll bring you that as soon as it happens.
But first, we head to Fox Connecticut's Tony Terzi, who is live at the scene in Valhalla and begins our team coverage tonight. Tony.
Brandon, Audrey, good evening, everyone. About 500 feet north of the Commerce Street intersection, where the impact between the Metro North train that left Grand Central Station at 5:44 last night and slammed into an SUV driven by a 49-year-old mother of 3 by the name of Ellen Brody of Edgemont. As you can see, they're getting set to move the train from the scene, and the SUV itself is still melted to that front of the train. The National Transportation Safety Board is utilizing experts in various areas, including railroad signals, traffic signals, railroad crossing gates, and recorders, which are essentially the black boxes on board trains.
In addition to the train recorders, there are event recorders on the signals. So the crossing gates, the signals themselves, the green lights and the red lights that are alongside the railroad track.
And the investigation will become high-tech.
We've brought in a 3D laser scanning device to be able to scan this wreckage.
15 passengers were said to have sustained serious injuries. One who escaped without a scar, a passenger in the lead car.
I just heard a very loud bang and a lot of screaming. People were screaming, call 911, fire extinguisher, we hit something.
After the impact, which pushed the SUV some 400 feet, the vehicle exploded and there was fire in the train.
I did feel the heat. It was a little bit in front of my face, but you know what, again, I'm just lucky to be alive.
Amongst all the desperation and chaos, there was calm in the burning lead car.
Somebody was thinking quickly, broke the emergency exit window, little hatch, pulled the lever down, helped them slide the door out, and I jumped out.
Among the first responders, the owner of the Cliffs at Valhalla, a rock climbing gym located right across the street from the accident scene.
As someone who's been trained in first response dealing with rock climbing, we just kind of jumped into action, myself and my staff, helping the people off the train. A lot of people were jumping out, like breaking windows and jumping out.
And he says he used his gym as a staging area for several hundred dazed passengers.
We took our whole retail area and moved all the fixtures out and set up chairs and gave everybody water bottles and snacks and kind of let them use our internet and phones to call loved ones.
Back here live in Valhalla at the crash scene, you can see the SUV, which is still melted to the front of the train. They're working to free it from the tracks right now. And once they can achieve that, then they'll be able to move the trains up into a shed, a storage area where they will, meaning the NTSB, continue the investigation. We have heard from various newspapers in New York that a 53-year-old man and a 69-year-old man are among the 5 men who were passengers on the train that have perished, but we will wait for confirmation on that a bit later. For now, live in Valhalla, New York, Tony Terzi, Fox, Connecticut.
All right, Tony, thank you. With so many questions unanswered tonight, here's what we do know about the location of this latest Metro North accident. The crash happened at one of the busiest rail crossings in New York State. It's estimated more than 100 trains and 1,000 cars cross there each day. The crossing on Commerce Street does not have a recent history of accidents. The last deadly crash at the intersection was in 1984.
Metro North service between Pleasantville and North White Plains, New York is expected to be shut down for days while the investigation continues.
Yeah, Yeah, commuters in places like Danbury and Ridgefield now forced to find alternate routes. Fox Connecticut's Louisa Moeller continues tonight's team coverage with that part of the story.
Hey, Brent, Audrey, well, that's right. Riders on the Harlem line are now forced to take a bus around that closed area of track. And at the very same time, a very real emotional impact is being felt right here in our state. As investigators pored over a devastating scene in New York, the aftermath was felt right next door in Connecticut.
It was pretty much the worst experience all those people have ever been through. Many people just walk through, from what I understand, a cemetery to find their own way home.
Danbury Mayor Mark Boughton says 500 to 600 city residents and thousands more in the area commute into New York City via the Harlem line every day.
Naturally, we're concerned and worried that, that one of the victims may be from the area. Obviously, it's a tragedy for all the victims.
One area resident who endured the tragic train ride is the son of Mayor Boughton's own city clerk. Justin Kabak documented his ordeal through social media with these terrifying photos. He spoke out in an interview with CNN this afternoon.
They smell gas up front. We got to make our way to the back. At that point, I still didn't even know that we struck a vehicle. Yeah. I just thought maybe something was mechanically wrong with the train. They came on the intercom system, the conductor, and said that the train has struck a vehicle that was on the track. They gave us no other information. They didn't say if there was a fire, if there wasn't a fire.
Another passenger, James Wallace from Ridgefield, told the Hartford Courant, "You could see that there were flames in the first car. People were starting to panic. We were just trying to get people to stay calm." He said he witnessed the injured, including a man with a broken leg and a man who had lost his legs. For now, folks from Western Connecticut will have to find a way around the torn-up rail line as the investigation unfolds and 400 feet of new track is laid down.
They are going to be providing almost 200 or 300 buses, I understand, up and down the line to be able to move people around while they do the repairs.
Most are just worried about those who are suffering.
I don't believe it. It's horrible. I feel bad for these people, but it shouldn't have happened.
Earlier today, Mayor Boughton told me that at this point he is not aware of any victims from Danbury. Louisa Moeller, Fox, Connecticut.
Louisa, thank you. Senator Richard Blumenthal is calling for an increase in rail passenger safety, saying this most recent accident could have been prevented. The senator calling for answers quickly and vowing to push relentlessly for stronger measures to ensure commuter safety. Do stay with Fox Connecticut for continuing coverage and live reports. As always, we have the latest on our website, foxct.com.
New tonight, DEEP officials dealing with a minor train accident in North Haven. The agency says an empty natural gas tanker tried to cross the tracks at Universal Drive and was hit by a train. The cargo tank was empty, but the truck's saddle tanks ruptured and spilled about 250 gallons of diesel fuel. The spill was contained to the tracks, and the surrounding soil did not contaminate any water bodies. Also new at 5, a break in a 4-year-old cold case out of Norwich. A man accused of murdering a woman in her own home as her young children looked on is in police custody tonight.
Cops also tell us more arrests are in the works to bring Jacqueline Worth's killers to justice. Fox Connecticut's Jen Bernstein joins us with new information. Jen?
Brennan, Audrey, this was really a cold murder. Worth was shot several times in front of her 2 young boys in 2011. After an extensive investigation, which police say included countless interviews and hours mulling over the case, a 33-year-old man is facing charges.
LaShawn Cecil is behind bars, now charged with felony murder. Police say he's responsible for the killing of 26-year-old Jacqueline Worth.
He's been on the radar for a while, but we needed to develop the information to actually get an arrest warrant and make the arrest.
Police say in the early morning hours of December 14th, 2011, Worth heard a noise outside of her apartment on East Baltic Street in Norwich. She got up to investigate, and that's when someone shot through the door, striking her 7 times. Even though she was severely hurt, she was able to call police. During that call, her 2 young boys, at the time 2 and 7, could be heard begging their mother not to pass out. She eventually succumbed to her injuries. Norwich officer Scott DuPoint was the first to respond to the scene.
The day of the incident to now, it's been a thought in my head that we need to get this guy. And I was the last person to speak to her before she had passed away. So something that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life.
Since then, police have pounded the pavement trying to find her killer. In December, 3 years after her murder, her family gathered at her gravesite.
I love Mommy.
Her boys are being raised by an aunt and uncle. The family remained hopeful her case would one day be solved. And now a break with Cecil charged. Police believe he knew Worth, and they say others were involved.
We're going to continue to work the case until everyone involved has been arrested.
Police would not comment on the motive because the investigation is ongoing and they do anticipate more arrests. Anyone, though, with information is asked to call Norwich Police. Jen Bernstein, Fox, Connecticut.
Were there occasions when you also went out to eat? Aside from clubbing?
Yes.
Remember at the club in Providence?
Dinner dates, club outings, and football games. Defense lawyers spent the day hammering away at a key witness to prove Aaron Hernandez and Odin Lloyd were close friends. And that close friendship is one of the reasons the defense says the former NFL player would never kill Lloyd.
Prosecutors attempted to rebuild their case by calling Lloyd's mother to the witness stand. Fox Connecticut's John Charlton joins us tonight with more on today's testimony. John?
Audrey and Brent, for a third day, Odin Lloyd's girlfriend, Shania Jenkins, was on the stand testifying for the prosecution. And again today, prosecutors had questions about what she saw in Aaron Hernandez's home soon after the murder. Lloyd's mother was next on the stand, and she was warned to keep it together.
Observed your sister at some point going to the basement with an item?
Yes.
And what was that item?
A black trash bag.
The prosecution continued to dwell on the garbage bag Shania Jenkins says her sister Shayanna carried down to the basement of the home Shayanna shared with Aaron Hernandez in North Attleboro. It was after Odin Lloyd's murder, so what was in the bag? Does the prosecution know? Or was it part of the evidence prosecutors claim Hernandez destroyed before detectives could get their hands on it? Shania Jenkins says she drove from Connecticut to see her sister after receiving news that her boyfriend was dead.
It shows me walking into the house and hugging my sister when I first got there.
During cross-examination, Shania Jenkins revealed comfort also came from the man on trial for killing Lloyd.
Mr. Hernandez came up behind you?
Correct.
And rubbed your arm?
Yes.
And he asked if you were okay?
Yes. I believe he said, I've been through this death thing before. It will get better with time.
Hoping to provide a sense of how Hernandez was acting while Jenkins was visiting, attorney Charles Rankin read from her testimony to the grand jury.
He seemed shaken up, you know. He couldn't eat too much, but for the most part, kind of normal, a little secluded.
The next to take the stand was Lloyd's mother, Ursula Ward. Judge Susan Garsh had this directive before her testimony.
I understand that this is very emotional for you, but it's very important that you manage during this time you are testifying to retain control of your emotions and not to cry while you're looking at any photo that may be shown to you. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
One photo in particular, one of Lloyd's morgue photos, the defense argued the jury didn't need to see.
To use this with this woman is just plain cruel and unnecessary.
The judge allowed the photo. On the stand, Ward named off friends of her son. Hernandez was not one of them.
You have quite a few friends.
Okay. Did you know Aaron Hernandez?
No.
Had you ever met him before?
No.
Had he ever come to your home?
No.
And Ursula Ward's testimony was brief. She was followed by Captain Joseph Dorenzo of the North Attleboro Police Department. He testified that he saw tire tracks at the crime scene and that he and the other police officers on scene paid close attention to where they were walking so as not to disturb evidence. Captain Dorenzo is expected to take the stand again tomorrow morning. John Charlton, Fox, Connecticut.
Hearts are heavy at Southern Connecticut State University tonight. A cheerleading coach for the school was killed after a car accident Monday. 22-year-old Kayla Donnelly Smith and 61-year-old Winter Kristoff of Hartford were hit and killed on I-95 in Rye, New York. They were standing on the side of the highway after being involved in an accident when another driver lost control and hit them. It all happened during Monday's intense storm that caused many accidents across the region. All right, returning now to our top story, the Metro North crash in Valhalla, New York, that killed 5 passengers and a woman in an SUV that was in the tracks.
The National Transportation Safety Board is holding a news conference right now. Let's listen in live.
Metro North is reporting 6 fatalities. The NTSB has identified a multidisciplinary team with experts from the NTSB's Office of Rail Safety, our Office of Highway Safety, as well as the NTSB's Office of Research and Engineering. The investigation is being led by Michael Hiller. Mike has over 25 years of rail experience, extensive rail background. As many of you know, the NTSB arrived on scene about 10 or 10:30 this morning. We had people filtering in all morning, beginning with about 9 o'clock this morning. I arrived on scene about 10:30. We have surveyed the scene and obtained detailed measurements and dimensions of the wreckage area, and we photo documented the wreckage area, and that includes ground photographs as well as aerial photographs. And for reasons that are not precisely known at this time, but reasons that we intend to find out, for whatever reason, the Mercedes SUV was stopped on the tracks. Tomorrow, we should be able to report the speed that the train was traveling when it struck the SUV. We've downloaded the recorders. I'll tell you about that in just a moment, but we want to verify that information before we release it. But I think we should be able to have that information verified tomorrow. So at the point of the collision, the SUV was pushed about 1,000 feet down the tracks. And during that time, the electrified rail, the third rail, as we call it, penetrated the chassis of the automobile behind the driver's seat, behind and below the driver's seat. It penetrated the chassis, came out sort of over the right rear tire and upward at an angle, and then into the first rail car. This rail, for about 400 feet of this electrified, of what is called the third rail, it started breaking apart in about 80-foot sections, and for about 400 feet of the third rail, in other words, about 400 feet of this third rail was shoved into and breaking apart into mostly the first rail car, but at least one piece penetrated over into the second rail car. The entire interior of the first rail car was burned out. And the initial indications, and this is an initial indication subject to more science, the initial indications are that the fire was fueled by gasoline from the SUV. Our survival factors group is evaluating the adequacy of the emergency exits, and we're also examining the strength, the crashworthiness strength of the rail cars. We have a group looking at signals. And when I talk about signals, I'm talking about the rail signals themselves that would govern the speeds and the authority of the trains to travel along the track. And I'm talking about highway traffic signals that we're all familiar with. So we have somebody that's looking at the rail traffic signals, the highway traffic signals, as well as the crossing gates at the rail crossing. And each of these devices that I just mentioned, each of them have recorders. And we've been able to download those recorders. And again, we've only been here for a few hours. We've gotten a lot done so far, but we have not really evaluated those data to check for validity. So that's something that we believe we should be able to provide you with tomorrow when we have a media briefing. We're investigating to determine if the design requirements for this type of grade crossing meet federal requirements. We would do that in any grade crossing accident to make sure that it does comply with federal requirements. We have an expert looking, our track specialists are evaluating to see if the alignment of the third rail was within required specs. We also want to know, was the electrical power to the third rail, was it interrupted when it started to break apart as it was designed to do? So of course when the continuity of that third rail is interrupted, the power should automatically be removed, and that's something that we want to look at. Arrangements are being made to interview the train crew, the engineer and the conductor, and we hope to get that done either tomorrow or the next day. As I mentioned earlier this morning when I briefed, these folks have been through a very traumatic event. We want to make sure that they're in a position to be able to talk to us, and so that's why we don't just rush to do it today, but we believe we can get that done either tomorrow or the next day. The mechanical condition of the train, that's something that we would always look at in any train accident. So we want to make sure, just routinely, we want to make sure that the brakes were functioning properly and look for anything that may have precluded the timely stopping of the train. The event recorders. Each of the cars of the train has an event recorder. And so one of those event recorders has been shipped to our lab in Washington, D.C., and another one has been downloaded here on site. And we're pleased to say that the one that we downloaded on site, we've had a successful download, and we plan to be able to release information to you tomorrow on that. Again, we want to look at the data, understand it, before we just give you unverified data. We also have been looking in the SUV to see if there may be any memory modules that may be useful. However, that vehicle was extensively fire damaged, and so honestly I'm not horribly optimistic that we'll be able to recover anything from that from a memory perspective, but we are looking at that. We are conducting a complete and thorough investigation of elements that may have contributed to the intensity of the fire. The emergency response. We are interested in learning anything and everything that we can about the adequacy of the emergency response. That's something that we routinely do in any investigation. We would be looking at things like 911 records, the timeliness of the response, the number of responders. We're looking at those types of things. That's the rail components of this investigation. There's a highway component to it, and that is basically the big question everybody wants to know is, why was this vehicle in the crossing? And we want to understand, as many of you know, there was a traffic detour yesterday evening due to a prior traffic highway crash on the expressway. So we want to understand what, if any, effect that detour may have played in setting up this accident sequence. We're interested in talking to witnesses. As we know, in this day and age, everybody has cell phones and video and things like that. We're interested in any video footage that people may have. If anybody witnessed the accident or would like to provide us with information, we have set up an email address, and we would invite you and encourage you to email the NTSB at witness@ntsb.gov. Again, that's witness at ntsb.gov.
All right, you're just hearing there from officials from the NTSB, just giving the very latest on their very preliminary findings in their investigation into the deadly crash in New York, looking into things like the speed the train might have been going, and also using data. They say in each car there's a recorder, and that they've recovered some of that recording information, and they've been able to download it, and that's some of the information they're going to sift through in these coming days.
Something I wasn't aware of, that there's a recorder in each of the train cars. I didn't know that. He really spent most of his time talking about what this investigation will look at. Since it's so early, they don't have that much information. Did go into some detail about the damage done to the vehicle and to the first couple of train cars. Talked about that third rail buckling and coming up through the cars and the damage that caused, the fire damage and so on. Anyway, stay with us. Of course, we'll continue to follow what the NTSB has to say through the rest of this press conference, and we'll have the very latest online, of course, all evening long and tonight at 10 and 11.
All right, we want to turn our attention for a moment to the weather here in Connecticut. Another slick commute in store tomorrow morning.
We got more snow on the way, but Dan, compared to Monday, it's kind of a drop in the bucket, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like tomorrow's just going to be a very, very minor snowfall, so nothing overly ominous. And by Monday, yeah, we could be talking about a little bit more snow. But today was a fairly decent day out there. We did have a couple of flurries at times, but this is our first above average day in the last 2 weeks. So it has been very, dare I say it, mild out there? Yeah, compared to what we felt. This is feeling nice. 38 in Windsor Locks right now, 36 in New Haven, 36 also in Meriden, and 36 in Waterbury. So the winds have shifted to more of a southerly component, so that's why it feels a little bit better out there. Radar showing nothing right now. We did have a few of those flurries, as I mentioned earlier. Now that's tomorrow's snow. You can see just south of Toronto, Chicago, approaching Cincinnati. That's an Arctic front. It has a little clipper system riding along it. That's going to bring us a chance for some snow. See, not much. You can see on the radar by tomorrow morning, not a whole lot of coverage across the state. It's very scattered in nature and not anything incredibly heavy. But that being said, you could pick up a coating to possibly an inch or two of snow. So that's why we have that coating to 2 across most of the state, with a possible 1 to 3 in parts of the hills. And it doesn't look like an overly impressive snowfall. But overall, as we go on for the next couple of days, we'll just keep the cold around big time, and we'll talk about your 7-day forecast coming up in just a little bit.
All right, Dan, thanks a lot. No deal after more than 2 years of back and forth. It appears state hospital buyout talks are over. We sit down with Hartford Courant editor Andrew Julian just ahead.
Plus, a victory lap for the New England Patriots. How Boston celebrated their team's Super Bowl win today.
And feeling lucky, tonight's Powerball jackpot hitting a sky-high total. We're going to add it up after this break.